you kind of usually have a routine when we're not in the period that we're in at the moment when it comes to studio work?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the routine depends on if I'm with an artist or not. So if I'm on my own, yeah, I come to the studio every day. Yeah, I work like every day. It's like a normal job, if you like. I get in at 10, finish about 7 or 8 or something like that. Depends on what I'm doing. But yeah, I'm in every day, basically. Seldom am I not. Or of course, if I do a different session or go away or whatever I'm doing there, that's that. And if I'm working with an artist, I work around them for the most part. Depends on what it is.
Is the creativity different when you're in the kind of zone 10 till 8 or whatever compared to if it's maybe a little bit more spontaneous around an artist?
It's different, yeah, but I'm not sure. I think sometimes when you're working with someone, they want to do some like crazy hours. 1, for productivity, and 2, because they just like want to have a laugh. Like, let's stay up really late and, go mad. It's like, yeah, cool. It's like, I've been making records for quite a long time now. I know what happens with that. Generally nothing. Everyone just gets fucking knackered. So there's only so much you can do in a day. I mean, if you get a good idea, it could happen in like 5 minutes and it's done. And then you sort of feel like you want to make the most of the day because of money and time and studio costs or something. So you end up just ruining that idea for the other 8 hours. So I guess it's different. But I think when I'm coming to my studio and doing my own bits, I'm on my own. There's only so much you can do. I mean, occasionally I'll stay up really late and have a mad one. But again, you just get tired. So unless maybe you're composing, that's a bit different. I guess it depends if you're composing or mixing, or it depends what I'm doing, really, because I do so many different things. Depending on the task at hand, I'd say.
Are the composing and the producing sides of the brain quite different?
Yes, in that when I'm producing another artist, obviously I'm producing them, so you're sort of in a more of a mentoring role. But if I'm writing something either for myself or with someone else, yeah, it is a different part of the brain, because you're just sort of just writing, is going with the flow of whatever that is. I'm less preoccupied about what someone is after. I'm very rarely writing to any sort of goal other than just writing a song. I mean, there might be a context of like the genre, or like, it's a pop song or something. But other than that, don't let anything else get in the way. Production's a bit different because there tends to be a bit of a goal. We want this, or, we kind of want to move in this direction, or we're not happy with what we've done before, or I don't know, whatever it may be. So yeah, you have to be a little bit more aware of that. But writing's just like, you just write a song.
And then you kind of categorize it after, depending on what you might use it for. Yeah,
always. Yeah. I mean, people say they came up with this idea in their head and then they wrote it all down. Probably not true. I mean, maybe. I think most people that I've worked with, at least, you just do stuff, and then afterwards you give it a name, slap a name on it, put it in a box, and that's what it is. I'm sure there are situations where that's not true. Like, I don't know, if you're writing a song with Diplo or something, he's like, well, I want to play this in the club. It's going to be 4 to the floor. It's going to be 128 beats per minute. Do you know what I mean? That you'd have that. But even so, to be fair, even with that framework in mind, you would still do what you want around that. You can just put any old vocal on it. It's kind of, as long as it's 4 to the floor, you're going to be 90% of the way there.
I guess with every project, there are kind of certain natural limitations. Like, if you think about something like with Royal Blood, you've kind of got those 2 instruments that you're working with to a certain extent, in the same way that he's got the 4 on the floor and the 128 BPM.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, the limitations there, but it doesn't make it any less interesting. So that the dance music example isn't to say that it's not any more interesting or better or worse. It's just it's different. It's just a framework.
It's different limitations. Yeah. Is that one of the first things you do when you go into the studio with an artist? Kind of figure out what the limitations are going to be?
I wouldn't say I'll try and figure them out. I'd try and make as many of them as possible. Just because, well, that's maybe an exaggeration. I would like everything to be available to myself and said artist. However, you have to kind of go somewhere. So the limitation would be, yeah, maybe instrumentation, something like, well, Blood Like said, it's bass and drums, so that's what it is. I did actually introduce a keyboard to that album as one little bit of fun, sort of break out, give everyone a chance to sort of like not get stuck in a rut with the bass or whatever. But in regards to the actual studio, yeah, there's just too much stuff. I mean, I've got loads of stuff. The studio's got loads of stuff. I think if it brings an idea, then fine. It's like, say, if I write a song on some sort of mad synth or drum machine or something like that, which would be my go-to sort of way of doing that, writing a song. But at the end of the day, you end up just playing on a guitar and it's C, G, and D. Do you know what I mean?
You naturally fall into that pattern.
The process, yeah. It is what it is. I guess I don't make particularly avant-garde music, so that's that. But maybe I will. But for the moment, if I'm writing a song or producing one, it is what it is. So yeah, so all the gear and all the instruments are definitely vehicles to get somewhere, but limitations are good. Even just from the perspective of more the engineering, the production. Just something really simple, like if you're recording something with loads of microphones and then you play it back and you can change the mix and the balance, I mean, that's got to stop at some point. So at some point you just got to say, right, this is it, we're using that mic or whatever it is. I can't have 10 on everything. So you have to really narrow that down. Drums is a good example of that. You can put a million mics up on the drum kit, or you can use one and so on. So yeah, you got to limit that. Just simply due to time, because it's boring selecting microphones. At first it's fun, but then it's not. So
it almost comes down to a practical
there's much
thing
more
at that
interesting
point, doesn't
things
it?
to talk about. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's practical. Yeah, because it's just I'm there, or we're there to make music, and really, if it's great music and great content, it's gonna sound pretty good with any of the mics you put up, to be honest. So it's seldom worth spending too much time on.
I know you were saying there as well, though, that you don't. I think the phrasing you used was avant-garde. You don't make particularly avant-garde music, but something like Larry Pink the Human is kind of pushing the boat out in some directions, and particularly in a production sense, when you're kind of pushing, traditional acoustic-y stuff and this kind of fluctuating electronic production together. What are you kind of setting down as limitations for that?
Well, thank you for observing that. That's cool. Yeah, I think with that, because it's my own project, hopefully it is a bit more avant-garde, which is I take that as a compliment, in that would be something that would inspire me, especially when we're making essentially what is pop music. It's got lyrics and a melody and their songs. So yeah, I try and throw in as much weird stuff as possible, and not just for the sake of it, but because I love it, and Laurie does also. And with that, we would record things in a bit more of a silly way, which I'd always try and do with other artists in the studio, but it's a little bit harder for the most part to do that. So an example of that would be, we will record vocals with some stupid effect on them, and there's no...
Can't change it.
You can't. There's no backup plan. Or we've got this guitar pedal we often just record the guitars through, and it's all wobbly and weird. And sometimes it just sounds like it's broken and it's a bit hard to use, but it sounds really great. So we just record through it, and then there's no option to make that clean. That's why that is going in that direction, and that's what inspires us when we're in the studio writing stuff. And we're writing it and recording it at the same time for the most part, at least the instruments and all the production stuff. So yeah, we're trying to make it as arty as possible, but not go out of our way to make it weird. We're not trying to make it stupid, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that stuff? It's cool. It's like, why not just do something a bit more weird, just hang it upside down or whatever. And so yeah, so when I'm producing stuff that isn't my own music, it's a little bit easier to be scared of all that, because down the line your record label might go, oh, that's great, that's going to be the single, have you got a clean version of that? It's like, nope. Which obviously does happen a lot, but it maybe doesn't happen as much as it should nowadays. But yeah, I try and bring in the weird stuff as much as possible.
If you were writing and producing that at the same time almost, does that put you in a completely different... we were saying earlier that the writing headspace can be quite different to the producing one. Does that put you in a completely different headspace altogether if you're doing both at the same time, pretty much?
Probably. Yeah, well, one definitely informs the other, especially if you're doing something more abstract. Then it becomes one and the same, which is often why the term producer and the term we're talking about it is obviously how I am a producer, which I don't need to explain to you, but I'm more the sort of overseeing of a whole record or a band or an artist from the all the stages. But obviously the term producer means loads of different things nowadays, so it's a little bit hard word to use sometimes. Well, not hard word, but hard word to explain to someone if they don't understand what you're doing. So yeah, like an electronic music artist, they are produced, like their production is the writing. There is no difference, I would say. If you're Aphex Twin, you're not sitting there going, oh, I'm going to write a song today. You're not going, oh, I'm going to produce a song today. It just is. He probably has the title of the producer and the writer, but they're the same thing, I would say. So when I'm writing and producing, it's a bit of that. It's kind of like, well, that drum hook is really cool, so that's the song, that's the hook. But that in itself is production, because I've made a decision on the aesthetic of that thing. Yeah, so the lines are blurry, and the lines also become blurry sometimes when you're producing something and you are actually writing it without necessarily going in with that title.
Is the role of the producer evolving then as a result of that becoming more prevalent? More artists, expressing themselves through both kind of
yeah, it's changing for sure. It probably always has been blurry. I mean, it's a good thing that it's changed, by the way. I think it's cool because it's opened up the producer role to lots of different people, which maybe it wouldn't have done previously. Because obviously, if you had to go into like a big studio, how you imagine the studio to look, to get in there, you'd have to be of a certain standard, shall we say, or an engineer, or have enough money to go in there. And obviously now that's not the case. You could just be in your bedroom and call yourself a producer, and rightfully so. The problem with it also is that if you're in a studio and everyone's got a laptop making music, suddenly everyone's a producer, which I would say they're not. Well, they could be, but for the sake of this conversation, they're just musicians making music. They just happen to be using a laptop. So I guess that's evolved. But then, as I said earlier, it's more about the term as well. It's like how people perceive the term. So I guess essentially it just becomes watered down, because sometimes you look at, if you look at some pop records, they've probably got like 10 producers in each song. They're probably all the songwriters as well, and they're probably all the musicians also, but it's all just thrown into one big lump.
Yeah, it's like Kanye West type thing where you've got people making beats in every room.
Yeah, so 20 years ago that would have been like, I don't know, Muscle Shoals or something like that, and you've got all these he's got these amazing players, and they're all just the house band. They are playing the track and they're coming up with the beats or whatever. That would be that, but now it's called producers because they're using, I guess, a laptop as opposed to drums or a bass or whatever. So yeah, I think some stuff that's fine, like Kanye West, that's whatever, but for other things it maybe can make it a bit too complicated, just in terms of like everyone getting different like splits of the song and all that sort of shit.
Too many cooks,
exactly. So I think generally speaking, having a producer of said work is the most efficient way of doing things. Maybe that's an ego thing from my perspective, or the other way around. But it's like a director of a film. I mean, sure, you got a DOP, you got a cameraman, you got producers of the film, you got whatever, a myriad of people involved, way more than a record. But there's still one person directing the film for a good reason. It would be a bit like all the actors having a camera and going, well, we're sort of directing this as well because we're sort of directing ourselves. It's like, yeah, of course you are, because you're an actor and you have to sort of direct yourself into into certain emotions, or the way you look or whatever. Of course, you're involved in the direction process by proxy. So I would argue that's kind of a similar thing in the studio. Like, everyone can sort of say they're the producer if they're quite involved in the making of the song, but they're not. I don't think they necessarily need to say that or have to be. But maybe it's more popular to say that now.
I guess that said as well, though, they're doing it in service of someone else's vision. So that's not really what the traditional producer role was.
No, I guess not. But again, technology's helped that morph. Maybe it hasn't changed as much as we think. It's just artists or producers or whatever have the different facilities available to them now. So
was your U2 experience similar to what we've just been talking about in any way? Because they kind of, is almost like a community of people working on that record.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, they generally have always used many producers for their records. I think for multiple reasons. One of them practicality as well, just so they can be in different places, and it makes sense. Obviously, they're quite busy individuals, so having someone in America, someone in Ireland, they can sort of pop around. I think it musically makes sense to them as well, just because it's more challenging, more interesting, all that sort of stuff. So, but in regards to my experience of that, there were 3 main producers, myself being one of them, and what would happen is you would sort of pick up a song, and that would become your song, and then another producer would pick up another song, that would kind of become their one. So we'd all know what everyone's working on, but you would kind of have your own thing. And then sometimes you'd be brought a song by the other guy, and they'd say, "Oh, what do you think of this?" Or and in some ways you kind of, from my experience, you kind of become executive producer over all of them, but you're only actually working on your main ones, like however many that is. And they get tossed around as well. So if yours fails miserably, then they'll go off with someone else and try it with them. And then that will fail miserably, and they'll come back and they'll be like, "Oh, we tried this version." And you'll be like, "Oh, that was so shit. Why do you do that?" And then you'd grab it again and sort of make your one better again.
It's like the Kendrick song on that record, isn't it? Like it turns up in a completely different state on his record to their one. I quite like that. I find it quite interesting that you can take a song and give it to a different artist and they kind of infuse it with their own take on it.
Yeah, well, he took that. Which way did it happen? Yeah, he took our original production and then put it in his record, and in the meantime we hadn't finished our version, if that makes sense.
Did they delay the record like a year or something? Because did they not delay it after the election? I think
something like that. Yeah, I don't remember the details of it, but yeah, they're always delaying things, so I wouldn't read too much. I wouldn't read too much into it. Probably wasn't finished. So that was like a production which he then used, and then by the time we got around to finishing our one, it obviously changed even more. So, but yeah, that's how that went. So that would happen quite a lot with them. They would get different people to do stuff or whatever. I mean, in that particular example, it was quite specific. I mean, we asked Kendrick to do it, so that was that. But along the way, there were certainly other people involved who would throw in their 2 cents in. But again, they would sort of use that a little bit more like a sounding board or an instrument than taking it too seriously. They would quite happily listen to something that someone's spent ages on and be like, "Cool, that's good, never mind," and just move on. Do you know what I mean? Again, they have the ability to do that due to finances. They don't really have to worry too much about that, so they can mess around as much as they want, but for a good reason, to try and make the song better. Try and make it a hit, basically.
Sounds like that would produce quite a liberating energy in the kind of environment that you're in working on it.
Yeah, definitely. You can do what you want with those guys because they don't care. I mean, they care a lot, but do you know what I mean? There's no, they've got nothing to prove, so it's just like, yeah, go for it. So if I said, "Oh, let's, delete it and put it backwards, and I'll play, some sitar on it or something," they'd be like, "Yeah, cool, give it a shot." There's no like issue. Just like, yeah, fine. And then they'd be like, "Please don't do that again." or like, "Oh wow, that's fantastic. We'll use that one bar and then loop that and delete the rest." You know what I mean? You just generate ideas, and so yeah, it was liberating in that sense. There was no nothing was not allowed.
So what you were saying there as well, there tends to be kind of 3 producers overseeing it. Are you in the room together at points?
Oh no. I mean, we're in the room together sometimes. I mean, we obviously talk, and there's like a bit of camaraderie there, and a bit of competition also. Healthy competition. Yeah, in a cool way, not in a weird way. But no, not in the same room at the same time. No, different studios, or certainly different rooms and different things going on.
Did you get a window into how any of the other producers worked on that in any way?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, everyone was quite different. Yeah, I did get a window into how they worked. It was super interesting. It was a real learning curve for me, because normally when you make a record, there aren't lots of different producers, or if there are, it's because it's like a project where the artist has written with loads of different people, and they've just like written songs with producers, and you've kind of got them kicking around, and that is what it is. But with the U2 job, there was like 3 active producers actually making the record as we went along, so that's quite different. So yeah, you definitely get an insight into what they were up to. It's super interesting, and it sort of enforces what I wanted to do even more, because sometimes I'd be like, oh, I don't like that, I'm taking all these effects off quick, because the other one's got loads of effects on it and I don't like it. It sounds cheesy or something like that. You know, you sort of make some sort of judgment of it.
It's funny how, you know, we see artists doing, or songwriters rather, doing co-writes all the time and kind of getting a window into how other people work. But it seems like a far less common thing when it comes to producers, getting that window we're talking about there. Yeah,
it is far less common, I'd say, especially in the more sort of traditional I'm producing said artist way. As in, because when you're a pop producer, writer, you would probably come across quite a few. So yeah, it is weird. Yeah, it's like the captain of a ship. It's like having 4 on board. Bit weird. but you know, it's also fun. I mean, you know, you get to like talk about stuff and, you know, kind of have a bit of like producer counselling, which is quite funny.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to go on a ship from across the Atlantic. You all want to get to America, but you're all maybe a little bit different on ideas in terms of the path you could take together.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. I'll take that. Yeah, you can have that one. Yeah, pretty much. And then whilst I'm driving the ship, some of the other guys are like throwing an anchor off one side. You're like, for fuck's sake.
There's a mutiny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a bit like that. But you just got to do your own thing. I mean, it's no, you know, when you're in that sort of position, especially something like that, which is kind of a bit more full on, there's no time to worry about anything like that. You're just making music at the end of the day. It's not, you know, it's not rocket science. It's just do what you feel's good and just hope that works. If it doesn't, so be it. No point pretending.
What you were saying there as well about it being a little bit full on, that adds a certain pressure to it. And if you're working in a studio with a band and there's a time pressure, it's a slightly different pressure. Do different pressures have different consequences, if that makes sense? Do different pressures work into the record and impact it in different ways?
Yeah, so the pressure that normally takes place in the studio recording environment is that you're in a studio, everyone knows it's kind of expensive, everyone knows they don't have enough time, so then everyone does what everyone else does. They record it in the same way, they put up the same old mics, they do, you know, you fall into like a formula, which for the most part isn't very interesting. We all do it a bit, and obviously us producers and artists are trying not to do that the whole time, being like, this is really different and like the coolest thing ever and no one's ever done it before. But, you know, most of the time that's not happening. So that's the downside of the pressure of what we do, is that the artist in particular sort of feels that and feels like they kind of, like it's limiting them in some way, or they have to sort of toe the line a little bit. They might not say that out loud, but that is happening. Even if it's like, oh, you know, we want a song on the radio, and they kind of have an expectation of what they think that is. Stuff like that gets in the way, which is a real shame. So sometimes coming to like my studio, which isn't really expensive, it's just like basic, and, you know, I mean, it's nice, but it's not a big posh studio. It's sometimes better because there's no clock, you know, there's no day rate or anything like that. So hopefully that enables me and said artist to do something a bit more maybe true to what you want to get to. And also sometimes you just got to have a day off and just stop or just like walk out of the room or something. And some people find that very difficult when they know that, you know, of the time and cost involved. So yeah, I can't remember your original question, but does that answer it?
Yeah, I can't remember it either.
Okay.
I guess if you do that and you take a day off, it gives the ideas a bit of space to breathe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just can't force it. I mean, obviously it's my job to sort of coerce people a bit into, you know, getting the best out of them. Or maybe coerce isn't the right word. Coerce is sometimes the right word. Encourage maybe is a better word. Into making something great. Or at least not even making something great, but just they've already got something great there. Otherwise we wouldn't be there. So it's just capturing that greatness. So yeah, you really want as many fresh ideas as possible. You just want them to just keep popping up and then keep grabbing them and then before you know it, you've got quite a few great ideas and they're all just there. So really it's just about not ruining them and not trying to fit them in a box as much as possible, really, because nothing's as dramatic as you think it is. Like when you listen back, it's like, oh, this is super loud, super distorted. You listen to it back, it's like, it's not that loud. It's not as massive as you think. You have to like really make things way more dramatic than you think for them to translate it across. Like bands go, this is our heaviest record yet. Like rock bands, metal bands are like, yeah, this is the heaviest one you've ever heard. It's like it's like, it sounds just as heavy as the last. It's not really heavier. It's just what they've decided to say about it. So actually making something that sounds way more whatever than you think is, you have to go for it a bit more, I guess. Jump in. You can't half jump in. Like, if someone wants it like really like washy and full of reverb, like Cocktail Twins or something like that, you can't just put a bit of reverb on it and go, oh, we'll fix it in the mix. It's like, no. You've got to go like full reverb here. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it just won't make sense. It's like going, we'll shoot a black and white film, but we'll shoot it in colour first and then make it black and white afterwards. It's like, no, you have to shoot it in black and white. It emotionally won't make any sense to do that. I mean, it might do if that's what you're going for, and that's fine. But for the sake of this description, just shoot it in black and white. That's it. Done. Easy.
Yeah.
But it's not easy for people to do that. Yeah, exactly. It's not easy for people to do that, though. They think it's easy. They go, yeah, we'll do it all in black and white. It's like, go on then. And they go, no, actually, the record label might want a colour version. It's like, well, you can't have it both ways, so you're going to have to choose. And then they go colour.
It's maybe a way about getting what you want as well. Like if you do something like what you were saying with Larry Pink, where you'll put the effects on so you can't take them off. If you can't change it, you just kind of got to stick with it and you get what you originally had. And it comes back to conviction. Yeah,
exactly that. Yeah, you just got to believe in it, and you got to love it and enjoy it, And also be prepared for it to be shit. Like sometimes you'll shoot it in black and white and you'll be like, oh my God, this is just not work. It has not worked. Do you know what I mean? Like, this 16mm cost me £100 a roll to develop and it's just going to be thrown in the bin. I should have done it on my iPhone. Like, there's no point being clever for the sake of it, but you've got to try it. And often it's easy to not try it, basically, which is a shame. But I guess every artist is different, so they need different things. Not everyone could be sort of like forced to, try and be out of the box. But most of the artists I work with, thankfully, kind of go with that philosophy as much as they need to for themselves. So that's fine.
Do you sometimes have to make an artist believe in their idea?
Yeah, definitely. Just more due to confidence than anything else, because what they are good at, they can't necessarily recognise. So they might think they're good at something, or they think, oh, this is my sound, and I'm like, yeah, it's good, but like, what about that sound? What about that version of yourself? And that's often the most sort of vulnerable one. Like any of us, there's hidden secrets and emotions and experiences that you don't bang on about all day, but quite often they're important, and certainly from a musician's point of view, opening that part of themselves up is not easy, certainly to talk about, but you can talk about it with music and songs, and I guess that's what we do, isn't it? And that's what we love, really, emotion. So
can you get it out of them without speaking about it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, different ways. Depends on the person. Yeah, even just like, let's just say you're working with someone and they are quite shy or vulnerable, and so let's just I'm making up a hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
And there's someone else in the room, the manager or the record label or something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just in the studio. You won't hear me though. It's like, I know I won't hear you, but you being here is enough that it's annoying. So can you please leave? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not about, I don't think it's not about like you being in the way.
Yeah.
It's like just the very presence of that person affects the other person. It affects me and everyone else. Not necessarily in a bad way, but just in a way. So just giving the artist a nice environment. Again, that was hypothetical, but like those sort of things happen quite often. So yeah, you just create an environment where said artists can be vulnerable, or just try stuff they haven't gone for. Be that, I mean, I guess a singer's a good example, because singing isn't easy. You got to like do it loads of times and you get really tired, and it's not easy singing all day long. So yeah, you have to create an environment that's like feels like you can just go for it. It isn't always easy, but I guess I've got used to, I've got a thing, don't know what it is, but yeah, it works in the end. So
is that what you were using Jurassic Park for with the Howl and the Hum?
Yeah, you've done your research. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's exactly what I did. So with that, I can't tell too many secrets because they might listen to this. They had the song that we recorded when we had Jurassic Park on was Sweet Fading Silver, which is an amazing, beautiful song. It's a stunning song.
Fiat Punto.
Yeah, exactly. Lyrically and musically. It's got the word Fiat Punto in it, and it's emotional, so that's a challenge in itself. So they'd already written it. So there was an intrinsic pressure that they put upon themselves because they'd already recorded a sort of demo of it, and it was really good, but it wasn't kind of good enough, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it was good in that it was emotionally a great recording, but it didn't sound that great. So we knew we had to get a better version of it. So yeah, I didn't really make a big deal of it. I just purposely ignored that song. I didn't sort of talk about it with them too much. And then when the time was right, I just hit record and then sort of had that set up. So something a bit, they were like, what the fuck's going on? Why is Jurassic Park on? What are we doing? You're mad. Just to sort of like go totally like, what the fuck's this chap on about? Like, did we really ask him to produce this for us? And then just sort of to let him record it really and stayed out of the way. That was my approach at that particular moment in time, just to sort of make it not what everyone would expect.
Was this in your studio?
No, we recorded this at Big Jelly Studios, which is near me. It's in Ramsgate in Kent. Yeah, it's a great space. It's like an old, well, it's not like, it is an old church which they've converted into a really cool space. The big high ceiling. So yeah, so that's a good example of a really good studio that's not, it's not too expensive, it's not too high pressure, it's quite small. So that's a good example of being able to do that sort of thing there. Whereas if we'd have been somewhere in London that was maybe much more expensive, that would have been a bit harder to do. Kind of get projectors in and spend half a day setting that up and finding Jurassic Park on someone's laptop or whatever.
Have you got a guy in Ramsgate that can get you anything?
Well, that was Johnny. Yeah, so
Is that where you got the projector? Yeah.
Yeah. So Johnny is part of Youth Hymns, which is myself, Johnny, and Jake. So we've made music videos and commercials and other sort of music-related things over the last few years. So yeah, we've got a good rig of stuff. So I was like, Johnny, sort me out. Like half an hour later, we had this huge projector sort of like duct taped to some, keyboard stand. So yeah, thanks to Johnny for that one. I think I still owe him dinner for that.
Does being part of that visual collective bleed into Larry Pink in any way?
Yeah. I mean, they're really busy. I mean, it's more Jake and Johnny than myself. I was certainly part of the beginning of that. I mean, it's a I hate calling it a company. It sounds really official. Team. Well, yeah, it's a team effort. There's all the three of us, but those two are really the guys that do all the video stuff. But yeah, Johnny has shot a music video for Larry Pink, so that's coming soon. That's all I can say. So yeah, that nice. Bleeds into that definitely, and also just being around visual things is quite important to me because you can't always express yourself musically all the time, and also you might just see a picture or video and you're like, oh, that is wicked, and you kind of want to make some music that sort of has that feeling, or at least maybe not that feeling, but just inspires you. So like Laurie and I sometimes put on something like in the background, like some anime or something just a bit mad. And it's like, wow, what if music sounded like that? Obviously it does. Loads of artists make crazy music that does sound like anime looks. But we don't. Well, not yet. So you know what I mean? So yeah. So visual stuff is super important for sure. And Youth Hymns is, I mean, the stuff that Jake and Johnny do is I'm a big fan of what they're doing, and yeah, it's great to be involved.
Not to touch too much upon that video, because I know you can't say much about it, but is it in a different style to the other ones? Because the first 4 that you've put out have all been in their own kind of very different style, if that makes sense. They're all quite distinct.
Yeah. So the first four, we wanted to kind of let the directors do their thing and the artists. So one of them's illustrated and three of them are filmed. Yeah, we kind of just wanted them to do their thing, because often when you're making a music video in particular, it's very low budget. You just don't want to get in the way. So I find it's better to like let the director or the whoever sort of have their say on it, not muddy the waters too much. With this new video, we're in it, so I'll say that much. So yeah, so it's totally different. So yeah, it's a bit more fun, a bit more bandy, so people can kind of see what the hell we're up to. So yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be really good.
What's the balloon from when it comes to Larry?
So that again was a visual thing that we just had in the studio before we even started writing any music, because we were just thinking about what the hell are we going to do? What is this? I mean, to be fair, Laurie had some demos that he'd written of songs like that he'd just written after Slaves or whatever, and I obviously had some like random ideas also. So there was music, but the actual Larry Pink the Human project didn't exist at that point. And obviously Laurie is an artist, a visual artist. So yeah, when we started, that was very much part of what we were trying to achieve. Just like, what is it? You know, we thought maybe it would just start with artwork or just start with photography or something like that. In some ways, we probably hoped it would have started like that, but of course we are musicians, and before you know it, you're writing songs, and you know, like, wow, this is it, this is the single, let's go. So yeah, it's just a way in really for us to figure it out. And the balloon, I don't know if Laurie just drew the face first, or maybe he actually did it as a balloon. We were just like, oh, that's good, that's the guy, stick him on the thing and let's just go with that. And it helped us. We at the very beginning we were like, oh, should we say it's us? Should we just hold the balloons in front of our face? You know, like Slipknot or something, just like be hidden.
Try and do a Gorillaz thing.
Yeah, like Gorillaz, exactly. Yeah, like similar to what they obviously achieved incredibly well. Yeah, definitely inspired by that. Yeah, but before we knew it, we just ended up doing it our way, which obviously was not like Gorillaz, but yeah, the balloon was really a way in, and there's other characters coming as well. So
I like the idea that if you continue with the balloon, what the live show would have looked like, just the balloon, you know, kind of floating on stage with the music playing.
Yeah, that's kind of, it's funny enough, that is what we thought for the very first, because we were supposed to play The Great Escape this year, and we were going to do something a bit like that. That was the original sort of, to start with that. But obviously we've come too far now, so we'd have to we can't do that. But yeah, that would be fun. Maybe we'll do it like you know, the 10-year anniversary. We don't even show up.
Just play it through the PA.
Yeah.
Do you think it would have changed anyway without quarantine and everything that's kind of gone on? The idea for what you had as this project? Yeah,
it would have changed for sure, just because the outside influence of like, not in a bad way, but like having a small record label thing we've got going on, obviously management and stuff like that. You know, people want to push the project forward as much as possible. So yeah, we would have fallen into different patterns. Definitely, certainly, like doing gigs would have been really great. But in the same breath, not doing gigs has made us, or given us the opportunity rather, to write more songs and put more stuff out. So by the time we do a gig, people will hopefully have heard a few of them. Certainly a set's worth. So that's going to be cool, because then people will be hopefully actually want to come to hear the songs because they like them. But it is what it is. You just got to do your thing, and we're quite happy just writing and just making music, really. I mean, as long as we're doing that, that's the main thing. But yeah, of course, having some human involvement would be great. But ultimately, it hasn't impacted us negatively, I'd say. I mean, we're lucky we have a studio and stuff like that, so we can be quite self-sufficient. And the whole point was to make it self-sufficient and make it a bit bedroomy. And we're not quite going to Abbey Road yet, so
it feels very fluid as a creative project. Like anything could kind of happen with it in terms of the direction you want to take it in.
Yeah, totally. Certainly from Laurie's perspective, obviously, because he was in Slaves, and that, whether he likes it or not, he's in a box of whatever that genre is, punk, and the name of the band. It's quite a narrow path, not due to his fault, but just the way it's perceived. Like anything's perceived in the same way I would be perceived a certain way. You're a producer or whatever, whatever that means. So I think it's definitely more about us just doing whatever. Like we're the masters of our own destiny with it, to be honest. There's no one telling us what to do. There's no real pressure from anyone. We've both been around the block once making music, and we've had obviously some success and those sort of great things. So we've got nothing to prove, really. We just do whatever we want, which feels great. And it also means things like the genre might very well change.
Interesting.
In the future. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, watch this space. And then people will be like, what the hell have you done? Do you know what I mean? It's like, but it won't really matter, because for the most part, more artists could get away with that anyway. I mean, as long as the vocals are the same, you're halfway there, It sounds a bit like the artist.
What you were saying there about the desire that we kind of have to put artists in boxes, is that what kind of fuels side projects? Because they're not even just in music, they're kind of prevalent in every creative industry.
Yeah, they are. It most certainly does fuel side projects. The problem with it is that it's a blessing and a curse in that, let's just say, I don't know, let's say you're Robert Plant and you start your side project. It's like, well, it just sounds like the guy from Led Zeppelin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's the singer. So when you're the singer and you're doing a side project, it's quite difficult unless that becomes the new project, if that makes sense.
Like Gorillaz.
Like Gorillaz, yeah, exactly. That's another good example. So yeah, that became the project. It wasn't really a side project. It was just the new thing. So it's like an artistic development. If you do a side project and you just dip your toe in, 9 times out of 10, it's not that different from what you've done before. Yeah, so it's often not as successful as one hopes. And I think with music, it's quite a hard one. I think with like fashion or art or something like that, it's maybe a bit easier, if easy is the right word, just because your essence will still be in there somehow. Well, it will be, because there's no way around that. But your actual voice or how you sound is quite like specific. So like if you're a singer, it's quite hard to do a side project. For me, being a producer and now being an artist in a band and writing with other artists or whatever else I'm doing, I'm still quite enigmatic, so I can sort of do quite a lot of things and I don't trip myself up too much. But I think for some artists it's quite hard to sort of like make that leap. Again, they should, or at least make the leap and then bring it back into their actual project. So like when they go, oh yeah, I'm writing this like drum and bass album with someone else. It's like, cool, write a drum and bass album, then stick it on your album, and then, do you know what I mean? That would be wicked. And they're like, oh no, because I'm in a band. It's like, well, why don't you be in a drum and bass band?
It comes back to what you were saying earlier as well about you can't just do it a little bit. You kind of have to go the full pelt and put all your conviction into it.
Yeah.
Is most of your creativity in that sense then you kind of just following your instinct, or do you ever consciously think, I want to try and do something a little bit like this or in this vein? It's
definitely following my instinct, yes, for sure. But in the same breath, no, I do make decisions. Sometimes I'm like maybe stuck in a place for a moment, and I'm like, actually, I don't want to be stuck in this place, so I'll make make an energetic move to do something else for a minute, even if that's privately. Like even if I just sit here and just like listen to some music that I really like, or turn on my synths and stuff and just let them make crazy noises for a while, and then go back to something quite normal afterwards. Yeah, that's also fine. So no, instincts are really the most important part. As soon as you start intellectualizing, art becomes less exciting. It's basically, stuff's exciting when it's new. If you hear something new, you're like, whoa, this is well good. Like, what is that sound? That's it. It's happened. It's new. The newness is gone. So you just record that or whatever it is, use it, and then that's the thing.
And that's a Dylan quote. What you were saying there about intellectual thought. I think it's something like intellectual thought is the death of the creative impulse. Is something that
did
he
you
said.
say that? Okay, yeah, I probably nicked that without.
I'm probably paraphrasing, but
yeah, that's right. Me and Dylan, yeah. I mean, intellect is useful to a certain degree, but I wouldn't intellectualize things too much. I mean, certainly like with production as a concept and as a discussion. Not that we're discussing that specifically, but say if you want a bit more of a nerdy production talk, invariably you end up talking about what equipment you use and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like, And I love all that, by the way, don't get me wrong. I love a good old nerd off. I'll have a nerd off every day with my engineer. That's fun. But it's simply that. It's not that inspiring. Coming up with a new idea or a new song, or an artist having a moment is what it's all about. So the intellectual side of like how you record it or whatever is fairly subsidiary, albeit important, but subsidiary nonetheless. So when someone says, "Oh, how did you get that? What did you put on that thing?" It's like, well, it's the wrong question, really. Essentially, it's like, how did you get them to play that, or how do you get them to say that? Do you know what I mean? Like we were talking about vocalists earlier on, how did you get them to sound so like vulnerable? It's like, well, I can tell you right now, it wasn't the microphone which did it, or maybe it was. Maybe they like the look of it. I don't know.
They trusted the microphone.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Well, to be fair, that can happen. Yeah, if you provide someone like maybe a very old microphone or something that looks really cool and it's got some history to it, that might be enticing rather than a brand new posh one. But again, that it's not the microphone that did the work. It's the emotional connection the person had or didn't have to it, which is the important thing. They weren't going, "Oh, what's the technical specification of this mic?" They don't give a shit. Do you know what I mean?
Is it easier or harder to spot good ideas when you're coming up with them yourself, as opposed to being in the studio with an artist and you can see them when they have that spark?
That's a good question, actually. You have to be quite open all the time when you're in the room. You have to be really ready to capture an idea. So if that's my own idea, then yeah, it's just as valid as anyone else's in the room. So I would be willing to put it forward, and that maybe comes with confidence as well, to sort of say, "Oh, try this," and people are like, "That sounds rubbish," and you're like, "Hang on, wait a minute." It's all about context, and you put it in. Yeah, so there's a bit about confidence, which just comes with a bit of time, I guess, bit of experience. So yeah, you just got to be open to whatever's going on, and kind of in tune to what the vision is as well. And also, if it's my own idea, generally speaking, I'll be less precious. So if I did voice it and everyone's like, "Oh, that's shit," then I won't be that offended. Well, I won't be offended at all, but I'll be more conscious of offending someone else who's come up with something in the band, say, because I don't want to sort of make them feel like their idea hasn't been listened to properly or whatever, because I am listening to what their idea is for sure. It also might be not so good.
The danger there is that if you do go on too kind of strong, they can then become closed off in the studio environment. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. You wouldn't want that, because any idea is a good idea, and often the people who are maybe less verbal or less outwardly excited in the room might actually be invariably listening more and much more aware of a broader view of what's happening. For example, this sounds funny, but it's true. Like often in a band scenario, often the bass player is like the one. They know what's going on, and it's like, "Oh, it's the bass. Yeah, it's just a bit of bass." But more often than not, they have a very good overview of everything else, not just musically, but within the sort of setup of the band and what each member needs emotionally or whatever else. So yeah, everyone's there for a reason, basically.
The bass player serves the song more than anyone else does in some ways, so they kind of have to slot in perfectly.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, of course. But they're generally speaking not the most outlandish members of the group, or the most sort of virtuosic, shall we say?
Unless you're Flea.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's doing all right, isn't he? Yeah, he's certainly filling the gaps. But yeah, you know what I mean. They're just sort of sitting back. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there isn't a hierarchy. I mean, well, there's often a leader, a band leader for sure, in a band context, or obviously the solo artist. They are the leader of their own thing. In regards to having ideas and stuff, yeah, I think everyone's just got to be open and willing to accept wherever they come from. You have to just be tuned in to when they might appear, and that's basically my job is that I'm not sitting there trying to create stuff. I'm not sitting there going, oh, like this drum sound, this bass sound, oh, this synth, oh, the production. I'm not sitting there trying to work it all out, because obviously it's impossible. I'm just simply trying to let it happen, and when it does happen, go, oh, that's great. Why don't we do that for a bit, and hopefully everyone's on board with that. Or you just capture it and simply record it, and then you play it back to someone later, and they're like, wow, that's great. Why didn't we try that? It's like, well, I did mention it, but you were, tuning the rack tom. So it's quite funny.
What does music give you in life that nothing else does?
God, should have had a cup of tea before you gave me that question. What does music give me in life that nothing else does? I guess without getting too deep and philosophical, it brings me great joy, which is a special thing. Joy itself is, you can't really generate joy. You can't sort of make it happen willingly. So music definitely gives me joy, and other people joy, which is important, because that sort of in turn gives you more.
Very reciprocal.
Exactly. So it gives me that. It's ephemeral, which is quite interesting. It doesn't, exist. So let's say you've written a song and you're like, yeah, this is cool, and you've recorded it, and you're really happy with it. Every time it's performed from there on, it's different, and when people sing it in their own head, they sing it differently to how it goes quite often, which is quite a good little phenomenon. And then when people sing it together, it's just another thing, and and so on and so forth. I think that's quite special. I like lots of different sorts of art, but like a painting, you just look at it on the wall. Of course, you can experience a painting in different ways, and you could argue lots of things about paintings, which I won't go into now. But essentially, let's just agree that it's on the wall and it's there, and assuming everyone's looking at the same thing, it is what it is. Whereas a song kind of isn't really like that, or music isn't like that, especially when it's performed. It's obviously something totally different to how it was conceived, which is quite interesting. So I guess it gives me that outlet artistically to make something which is transient, which obviously everything is, but music especially is like that. So yeah, I don't know, it just gives me joy. Good stuff.